We're going to start with how to set up the game before we go on to the how to play section. First, place all movement boards to the side of the game area. Also place the hierarchy table, the deck of common action cards, and the top player marker to the side of the game area. Each player chooses a character and takes their character board and places it in front of them. Take the corresponding character action card and place it face up in front of you. One player is the red player and the other is the blue. Take your corresponding takedown markers and place them in front of you. Now it's time to place the dice on the character board. Each player takes 5 dice, one of each color, and places them in the left column, called the place column, according to the value and color of the printed dice on the character board. In the case of the grizzly, he places a white die with a value 4 on it in the strength stat. The remaining dice colors all have a value 1. The gorilla instead places a 3 for the white die value for strength, a 2 for the blue speed value, and a 2 for the purple knowledge value. The gorilla also has a value of 1 for his brown technique value and his black experience value. Both players draw 2 cards from the common action deck and keep them face down in front of them. Now, they both take a takedown board and choose which side of the takedown board they want to play and place the board in front of them. They place the remaining dice in front of them, 5 each, one of each color. And that completes the setup, and we're ready to play. The game starts with a dice roll, so both players roll their dice at the same time. The player with the highest total becomes top player. Here, the blue player got a total of 17 and becomes the top player, and they get the top player token. Immediately after the dice roll is when you get to play an action card. You can play 1 action card per player per round. Playing an action card is optional though. The top player needs to first declare if they want to play their action card before the bottom player has to decide or to even declare that they will play an action card. So both players have a look at their action cards. The blue player declines to play an action card this round, but the red player wants to play their speed burst card, which allows them to change their blue dice into a 6. Action cards only affect roll dice and cannot be used on the dice in the place column. After the action cards phase, both players take their takedown markers into their hands. These markers are only used during the takedown phase. They both select one of the 3 options without showing their opponent. The options are takedown, guard pull, and takedown defense. Each of these will have an upper hand against one of the other during the takedown phase. On the count of 3, both players simultaneously reveal their choice. Here, they both selected takedown, so no one will get the technique bonus. Let's rotate the blue player's area so it'll be easier to follow through this video. Now, a close look at the player boards and movement boards, and some of their key mechanics. On the character board to the right of the 2 dice columns, there's a dice modification symbol next to each dice color. These are the dice modifications that are activated when you place a die of that color in the roll column. The first one is the white strength modification, which means that you will decrease the value of a die in the place column by 1. Note that if the die was a 1, it starts over and becomes a 6. Blue means flip the die over, so a 2 becomes a 5 and a 1 becomes a 6. Purple is to re-roll 1 die. Brown means that you increase the value of 1 die by 1, and as with a white die, it starts over, so if it's a 6, it becomes a 1. And finally, black allows you to increase the value of 1 die by 2. Moving over to the movement board, you will see these requirement values for each color on every technique. They are matching requirements. This means that in order to place a die in that spot, the value of that die needs to be equal or higher than that value. For instance, for the highlighted technique, you would need a white die that is a 5 or higher to be able to place it, but for brown and black, a 1 or higher can be placed. There's one more requirement on the movement board, which is the red bullseye beneath the technique. This is the minimum number of dice that must be placed on the technique in order to even attempt it. So in this case, the double leg takedown would need to have at least 3 dice placed in the column above it for it to even be attempted. Alright, back to the gameplay. The top player will always start placing their dice, and dice are always placed in descending color order. This means that the top player will first place their white die. The bottom player then places their white die, and so forth. So the blue player places his white die in the roll column of the character board to use the die modification. He uses it on his black die in the place column, and decreases it from a 1 to a 6. He then moves the white 3 in the place column to the double egg technique, since the 3 matches the requirement of that technique for the white color. And then the white die in the roll column slides into the empty slot where it will be ready to be used for the next round. The red player does the same move and moves his white 4 to the character board to get the dice modification, and he also uses it on his black die. He then moves the 4 to the technique column for the move single egg, and his rolled 4 then slides into the empty slot on the character board. Now we go to the blue die. In this case, the blue player cannot move the blue die directly to the movement board, even if they wanted to, since they only rolled a 2. And the blue matching requirement on the takedown they are attempting is 3, which is obviously higher than their 2. The blue player places a rolled die on the character board, which activates the dice modification to flip over a dice. This is used on the brown die, which is flipped from a 1 to a 6. Since the blue die in the place column is also only a 2, that die cannot be placed on the movement board, and the blue player is not able to place a blue die on the movement board, and instead it is the red player's turn. The red player move their blue 6 to the character board and flip over their blue dice in the place column to get a 6 there as well. This is then placed on the movement board, and the blue 6 in the roll column slides into the empty slot on the character board, which gives them a strong position for the next round. The blue player takes their purple 4, and since they do not want to risk a reroll at this time by using the purple dice modification, they decide to place the purple 4 directly on the movement board and thereby foregoing a dice modification this turn. The red player also placed their purple die directly on the movement board. The blue player then uses the brown 6 to increase the purple die in the place column by 1 in preparation for next round, and then place their brown 6 in the place column on the movement board, and the brown 6 in the roll column slides into the empty slot. The red player places their brown 3 directly on the movement board. The blue player then used the black die modification to increase their blue die in preparation for the next round, and then place their black 6 on the movement board. The red player uses their black die to increase the purple die and then move their black 6 to the movement board. And that concludes the dice placement for this round. Let's look at how the two players did. The blue player managed to place 4 dice for a combined skill point total of 19, but the red player managed to place all their 5 dice for a combined total of 25. That means that the red player was the one who successfully executed their technique, which was a single leg takedown. We then look at the outcome text under that technique to resolve the outcome. It says that the advantage difference determines which top position you end up in. See takedown table. The advantage difference is the difference between the red player's 25 versus the blue player's 19, so a skill point advantage of 6. Looking at the takedown table, that means that the players end up in turtle position, with the red player on top and the blue player on bottom. The players now remove all dice except the ones that are in the place column on their character board. They then pull out the turtle movement boards and give the turtle top movement board to the red player and the turtle bottom movement board to the blue player. The top player token is moved to the red player. And then the next round begins, and it starts with a simultaneous dice roll for both players. the top player starts to declare if they want to play an action card. The red player does, and he plays his character action card, Cardio Beast. This allows him to play one dice modification twice, so let's keep that in mind for this turn. The blue player does not want to play any action cards this round. The red player starts his dice placement by placing his white 6 directly onto the movement board onto the submission technique clock choke. The blue player now knows that the red player is going for the submission and tries to go on the defense by trying to block his opponent's move. The blue player places their white 5 directly onto the movement board for the block control technique. The red player places their blue die on the character board and uses the dice modification on the brown die and flips it over to a 6. Since he has played the Cardio Beast card, he gets to do a dice modification twice this round and uses this dice modification again, but this time on the black die, and he flips it over to a 6 as well. He then places the blue 6 onto the movement board. The blue player places their blue die on the character board and flips the purple die over from a 3 to a 4, and then places their blue 4 onto the movement board. The red player places their purple 6 directly onto the movement board. The blue player places their purple 2 onto the character board and uses the reroll on their black die. They reroll the black die and they get a 4. They then place their purple 4 onto the movement board, and as always, the purple die slides into the empty slot on the character board. The red player used their brown 4 on the character board to increase their white die in preparation for the next round, and then place their brown 6 onto the movement board. The blue player also increased their white die in preparation for the next round, and then placed their brown 6 on the movement board. The red player then placed their black 4 on the character board to increase their purple die by 2, and then move their black 6 to the movement board. The blue player placed their black 3 on the character board to increase their white die to a 6 for the next round, and then place their black 4 on the movement board. And that concludes the dice placement for this round. Let's see how they did. The blue player managed to place all their dice this time for a skill point total of 23, but the red player managed to get a perfect score of 30 and thereby succeed with their technique. And succeeding with a submission means you win the game. So in only the second round, the red player won with a clock choke submission from the turtle position. Of course, most matches will go longer than just 2 rounds, but in Jiu-Jitsu, sometimes a match is over in seconds. I hope this gives you a good understanding of the core mechanics of the game and how it's played. Thanks for watching, and remember, check out our Kickstarter when it launches later this year.